starting the first segment of Breakfast Show with the press review, and now we are joined in the studio by Mr. Mohamed Sheta, media expert. Good morning, sir.
A very lovely good morning to you and to your beautiful viewers.
Thank you, sir. And now we start with the main headlines from the newspaper. Now we'll start with Masri Al-Yawm, where President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi asserted that South Sudan occupies a certain position in for the Egyptians. The statement came during the president meeting on Tuesday with his South Sudanese counterpart Salva Kiir. South Sudan president praised President al-Sisi and the Egyptian government support for the reinstitution of stability in his country, calling on rebel groups to stop weakening its country's government. Kiir comments came during a press conference that was held at the presidential palace in Cairo after a meeting between Sisi and Kiir to discuss bilateral relations. The South Sudan president also praised several development projects implemented by Egypt in his country, adding that around 6,000 South Sudanese nationals are currently living and studying in Cairo. Kiir arrived in Cairo on Monday for a 3-day visit to hold talks with his Egyptian counterpart and other officials. Mr. Mohammed, how do you see the importance of the visiting of South Sudanese president, and at the same time he has lots of problems in his country with his vice president Riek Machar?
Yes. As a matter of fact, anyone knows that it's crucial for any country in order to have to have stability and safety and security inside their own country. They need to have good relations with their neighbors, especially with their direct neighbors. So it's very important that Sudan and South Sudan have very good relations to Egypt, and that we as Egypt or the Egyptian government should try to assist the Sudanese, counterparts in having a stable situation between themselves as well, because the stability of South Sudan and Sudan itself has a crucial and a direct impact on Egypt. We have direct borders with Sudan, so any instability in this country will definitely affect our stability as well. And we know that we have a very fragile relation I don't want to call it fragile, but we have some tensions, especially in regard to Shalatin. So I think it's very important that we have very good relations with both governments in order to enhance the stability between those countries and the region as a whole.
Okay, and moving to Shuru newspaper. First, before the newspaper, we have more about this issue in the following report.
Sudan's President Salva Kiir praised on Tuesday President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's and the Egyptian government's support for the reinstitution of stability in his country, calling on rebel groups to stop weakening his country's government. Kiir's comments came during a press conference that was held at the presidential palace in Cairo after a meeting between Sisi and Kiir to discuss bilateral relations. The South Sudan president also praised several development projects implemented by Egypt in his country, adding that around 6,000 South Sudanese nationals are currently living and studying in Cairo. Kiir arrived in Cairo on Monday for a 3-day visit to hold talks with his Egyptian counterpart and other officials. The Central African country has been gripped by civil war since Kiir sacked Riek Machar as vice president in 2013. More than 10,000 people have been killed and over 2 million displaced, many of whom have fled to neighboring Uganda, Ethiopia, Kenya, and South Sudan. A UN Security Council resolution in December 2013 authorized the deployment of a peacekeeping mission to the country, comprising 12,500 troops from 20 countries, including Egypt. Egypt has more than once expressed support for a peace agreement in South Sudan. In July 2016, a ceasefire was signed between President Kiir and Machar after 4 days of intense gun battles that killed at least 300.
And still with the press review, and moving to Al newspaper, where we read President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said in a TV phone interview on that Egypt's ongoing fight against terrorism in Sinai is taking a heavy toll on the state's resources. In a phone interview with the host Amr Adib on his late-night show, كل يوم, Sisi said that the cost of fighting terrorism has been huge over the last 3.5 years. Not only in the sacrifices made through the blood of their children, but also in the monetary cost. How do you see the Mr. Mohammed, the statements made by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi during his phone call with Amr Adib?
I was a little bit surprised actually to see President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi calling Mr. Amr Adib in his late night show live on air. Nevertheless, I think, of course, there were lots of question marks about the recent attack in El Arish, and lots of people were talking about it. Some people were criticizing it because it did not receive the media coverage it should have, and lots of people are asking why is Egypt suffering so many losses actually at each attack, and why can't we have a better safety in Arish and in other parts. Actually, I think, I don't want to blame anyone, but I think if you go around any embassy anywhere in Egypt, I think they're taking security and safety in a very lax way. Many of the gentlemen working in the police forces. I'm not blaming them, of course, but I think we should give it more attention, and they themselves, they should pay more attention to it. If you pass by any embassy, you will see them, or not all of them, but most of them, playing with their mobile phone, or just making phone calls, or sitting just in their car in front of any strategic building or embassy or whatever. I think we're not really concentrated or most of them are not really focusing and concentrated when they are at their checkpoints, for example. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to secure those checkpoints in a much better way, actually. I think
people say the problem is it's a fixed checkpoint, and most of the people there know where every checkpoint is and how long it stays. So the problem is they do not change, or it's not a movable checkpoint.
Actually, this is something very normal because if you have at certain borders, for example, the borders between countries, you have permanent checkpoints. So at the entrance of certain villages, you have permanent checkpoints. I think.
But we are not in a permanent. We are not in a natural situation. We are in an emergency.
Yes, but the problem is not having the permanent checkpoints or non-permanent ones. I think the problem is securing the permanent ones. I think there are so many advanced technologies which they could use. They could use drones. They could use alarm systems. I think there's so many different ways. Maybe they cost money, but I think we should the government should spend that money on using modern technology. You can have, for example, secondary checkpoints or primary checkpoints before the checkpoint itself. You can use it. You can use some X-ray systems or some robots, maybe even like some countries are using them. So I think there's so many ways to secure those checkpoints, and I think this will save lots of lives. But what I would like to point out, the cost of fighting terrorism is very high. But we should also not forget the cost of corruption in Egypt, and I think this is also needs to be approached in a very, very strict way, because we've seen lots of examples during the past couple of weeks where senior officials and people working in governmental positions have been caught while accepting bribes, and I think I think we should really pay more attention to that, because the problem is we should not only fight terrorism, but we should also fight corruption, because I think the cost of corruption is actually much higher than the losses we have, for example, or the cost we have from fighting terrorism. Yesterday, President-elect Donald Trump announced that one of his senior advisors will be his son-in-law. So many people were talking about the law of nepotism in the United States. I think we need such a law in Egypt as well, because I think especially our society is very much, how do you say it, is much closer to each other, and I think we should really have a spotlight on who's the cousin of who, and which official is working here, and maybe one of his cousins, third, fourth degrees, is benefiting from something. So I think this is something which the government and the parliament should pay very much attention to.
Okay, and moving to Al-Akhbar Al-Yawm, where we read the Minister of Agriculture, Sam Faid, on Tuesday, met with his Lebanese counterpart, who is an unofficial visit to Cairo. He asserted the importance of the historic relationship between Egypt and Lebanon, which is deep-rooted in history, especially in the field of agriculture and the exchange of exports and imports of agriculture products. Faid noted that he will form a committee consisting of experts at the Egyptian Ministry of Agriculture and their counterparts in Lebanon to solve all obstacles and problems of exports and imports in the two countries. And what's your comment on such a visit and a statement by Minister of Agriculture?
Well, it definitely will not harm. It's another good step, but I think it's not sufficient. I mean, we're not a agriculture nation as we should be. There's still lots of potential in improving the agriculture exports. Actually, maybe Lebanon is not the ideal partner for exporting agriculture goods. I think other countries like Australia, the United States, Europe, Russia have much more potential and would be much more beneficial for Egypt. But nevertheless, it's an interesting visit and an interesting meeting between the Minister of Agriculture. What is even more important than the meeting of the Minister of Agriculture is the meeting of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sameh Shukri, in Germany today, as well as the meetings which Minister Ahmed Darwish, can we call him minister still? I mean, he is an ex-minister, but now he's in charge of the economic development of the Suez Canal corridor, who's also currently visiting Germany, actually, at the same time. I don't know if they're kind of those two visits are related to each other, or if they coordinate with each other. But I think what I want to say here is that Germany is an ideal partner for Egypt in so many different ways. I mean, they used to have a cooperation foundation called GTZ. Now it's called GIZ, for international cooperation. I think we should benefit and try to use the capacities and capabilities of those cooperation foundations much better than we're currently doing. Germany also is very successful in other sectors like road safety, for example. We are suffering from road safety in Egypt, so we should use this opportunity to benefit from the experience which Germany has in this sector. Mr. Ahmed Darwish is visiting Germany, and he's, as I read in some newspaper, he's also meeting with some representatives of the German car industry in order to attract them to come to Egypt and invest in the Suez Canal corridor economic free zone. This is something very important because Germany is one of the leading nations in the automotive sector, for example, and we have a so-called automotive industry in Egypt, which is not really an industry, it's just an assembling sector, I would call it. It's not an industry. And in order to really push this sector ahead and to be able to compete, for example, with Morocco or Algeria or Tunisia, actually, Tunisia exports $12 billion worth of automotive components to Europe. So only components, not complete cars. On the other hand, Morocco is exporting up to 400,000 cars a year. In Egypt, we only produce like 30 or 40,000 cars, of which none is exported. Actually, they're only for the local market. So I hope that the government really takes this issue a little bit more serious. I read that one of the ministers said in an interview in Ahram Abdu, I think it was, that they are planning on the 30th of June 2017 to launch the first 100% made in Egypt car. I'm not really, first of all, there's nothing called 100% German-built car or 100% French-built car, because actually most of the parts of any car, 60 or 70% come from different countries. So this is something which proves that they really still did not understand how really the automotive sector is working. So I think before giving out such statements, it's very important to really have experts working on this sector, because otherwise we will not be able to attract the foreign investors. So hopefully they are on the right track. Let's wait till the 30th of June and then we'll talk about this issue again.
And moving to الأخبار اليوم, where a 12 Dutch member of a parliament delegation was informed of Egypt's internal developments in two separate meetings with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Parliament Speaker Ali Abdel Al. The delegation, led by the chairwoman of the Dutch Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee, met with al-Sisi earlier on Tuesday, where they discussed Egyptian-Dutch bilateral relations according to the Egyptian presidency. The president also discussed with the Dutch parliamentary the possible ways of benefiting from the Dutch experience in several fields, including education and culture, and the meeting was attended by Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri. Mr. Mohammed, I assume there was a visit also, maybe from 2 months or so, by also a Dutch delegation, and they said there is a kind of cooperation and memorandum of understanding, as I remember. So how Egypt can benefit from the Dutch time, we wanted very quickly.
Okay, to be honest, I don't recall the visit you were mentioning. Yeah. Of course, any of such visits, like I said, they will not harm. They will just strengthen the positions between the two parliaments or the two governments, actually the two countries. Talking about Amr Adib, yesterday he hosted a group of young students, actually. I think they were like in their early 20s or something, and they were talking about the parliament, actually. And I was surprised that only 4 of those 20 people went and voted for at the last parliamentary election, and this was a big surprise to me. And most of those, of course, who were sitting there when Amr Adib was asking them, what do you think of the parliament? They said, it does not represent me. So I'm not surprised, because only 4 of the 20 went to vote there. So it's very obvious that they're not really represented in a good way. In any case, I think the parliament really needs to do lots of
to exert more effort.
Definitely.
In order to reach at least people.
Not only on the international level, but also on the local level.
Well, Mr. Mohamed Sheta, media expert, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a lovely day, and to you and to your lovely viewers.
Thank you. And now we are moving to a quick break, so please stay tuned.